Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. I'm delighted today to be joined by Matt Ward, who's a founder and CEO, a serial entrepreneur who's had multiple exits and is now focused on purposeful and purpose-driven initiatives. Matt, welcome to Day in a Canoe podcast. You have a storied history of many startups and many successful exits. You started a successful podcast. You're a creator. Maybe you could give listeners an overview of what your journey has been in the entrepreneurial world.
Yeah, you could say I'm a bit of a doer. I don't sit still well, and I would do terrible sitting for a day in a canoe. So my background, I studied mechanical engineering. I found out fast I wasn't working for big corporate doing the same thing over and over. Got into e-commerce and entrepreneurship via podcasts. Moved to Southeast Asia to build out a crowdfunding company and podcast, only to find out, although he was the biggest and kind of best in the space, helping people raise money doesn't have jack to pay you with. So I got into manufacturing my own products, at the laptop case that I was going to open into a standing desk and manufacture with a factory I was working with in China. From design to prototype, I knew folks who were building and manufacturing products and just bringing them into the US and Europe and selling them white label. This was 2015, 2016 timeframe. I figured if they can, so can I. I started a home and garden company, Planted Perfect. Long story short, everyone in this space around e-commerce was teaching you how to make money online. And I found that wrong, like selling that expensive courses. And the real money is how you teach people how to make money. So I started another podcast, FBA All-Stars, more or less just walking through how I was building my businesses and doing it as a basically solo person with VAs throughout the world. I shared exactly how I was doing it and had the tagline, step 1 to 7 figures, the joke being, let's sell the business at the end of the year for $1 million. Halfway through the year, it wasn't a joke. I ended up selling it earn-out basis, but I hit the goal. Long story short, Trump messed a little bit of that up, and the guy who bought the business had to go back to running a trade company between the US and China. But all of that, and through this kind of experience, I'd learned a lot about selling, growth, marketing, and spent the next couple of years helping startups on strategy, growth, marketing, and a bit of investing as well when I thought that that money was coming from that exit that ended up, being a lot less exciting than it was meant to be. And I did this for a couple of years helping companies before realizing I'm tired of helping D2C and B2B SaaS companies sell more pointless crap. I want to do something that matters. And that's when I started Forward. And that's just to get the kind of 90-second spiel behind me so that we can get into a canoe and figure out where we're headed.
Well, that's a lot of activity, and I know you've spent a lot of energy on various projects. We have a number of listeners who are entrepreneurs, and they have, they go through the entrepreneurial roller coaster. You've started many companies, had successful exits. What have been some learnings along the way that you would pass on to say, here's some tips for your entrepreneurial journey?
It's never as good as you think it is or as bad as you think it is. Always great to keep in mind in the moment. Entrepreneurship's like an effing roller coaster, so you have to learn to deal with that. It's certainly not for everyone, and I would not recommend it for everyone. In fact, I only recommend it if you really have to do it. There's something either inside you that's kind of wired a little bit wrong that makes you want to do challenging and really hard things for essentially no reason but to prove it to the world, or because there's some massive problem in the world that you want to see solved or fixed. Other advice that I would give as well is take advice from others, even when you don't really want to, but only take advice from others that are further along the journey that you want to be on. because otherwise they'll give you advice to live their life and not yours.
You alluded to this whole cycle of creating something, having completion, but not maybe being fulfilled at the end of that. And that's the essence of why we focus on true wealth. We're helping our clients create better financial futures. But many times if we just focus on the money as the outcome, it becomes an empty room versus what's more available to support fulfillment and purpose. And that's the nature of the conversations we have here in the Day in a Canoe podcast. Did you experience kind of the emptiness or letdown moments of cycles, or like how did you calibrate that?
I think everybody does a bit. I've always been in that follow your passion and the money will come. I failed that quite a few times, I'll say. I think a better way of doing it is find what you're great at and can make good money doing, and do that and make your money so that you can focus on the things where your passion really truly is. I think I've never had big or massively exciting successes. So I can't say I got to the point where money doesn't matter or that's not a problem. Would love to get there at some point, but I also hear as well, money is a bit of a scorecard that never ends. It's like Instagram. If you start comparing, there's always more. There's always more. There's always more. Elon's got what, 100, 200 billion, and he's a drug addict and depressed and has a miserable life. I don't think money is what you want to optimize towards. I think it is much more around life and experiences, not something I'm necessarily great at or most entrepreneurs. But I do think that emptiness is there. And I think that's part of the reason as well that you see so many serial entrepreneurs is either the emptiness or that adrenaline high of doing something hard, building, taking on the world and creating something new. Between those different things, it's hard for serial entrepreneurs, so to speak, to be one-hit wonders and then happily ever after.
Yeah, there's a wiring that we all have. And with serial entrepreneurs, it's a very distinct wiring to create and continue that creation. But you talked about purpose and passion. Where does that land with you now? What are the things that you're focused on in your dashboard around those topics?
So for me, there was the whole ESG framework, environment, social, and governance. I always found the E to be exponentially more important than the other two. I think we're seeing some of the other sides these days. But for me, if we get the environment and the climate wrong, we have World War III, resource wars, mass migration / refugees, people fighting over enough to eat, and mass starvation at scales we've never seen before. If we mess up the kind of social aspects or the governance aspects of business, problematic, but not, it's basically the world we have today. So for me, it was around climate sustainability and doing something that really mattered. And that's why I started Forward. So Forward.earth, we connect the startups, the corporates, the governments, the investors, the researchers, the ecosystem players, the podcasters, the investors, everyone in and around the ecosystem who should meet, but otherwise never would, because they're where you said, and I can't even remember, it's close to Lake Tahoe, or in Zurich, or Sao Paulo, or Stockholm, or Tokyo, where they're focused on food and agriculture, or finance and banking, or transportation and mobility, or energy and infrastructure. And they're in these different silos, in these different ecosystems. And we've got the tech talent and capital to solve climate change, but not if it takes 10, 20, 30 years for the right folks to meet each other and connect and realize, wow, these innovations that are happening over here in Southeast Asia would be perfect for the EU initiatives here, would be perfect for these grant programs to bring sustainable jobs and regenerative agriculture to the Midwest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we can speed that process through networking and bringing the right people together, so you have not only the LinkedIn of meeting people and kind of just trying to sell them stuff or tell them why you're awesome, or the problems of different types of social media of consumption, showing off, focus, but also bring in some of that spontaneity of hey, here's the people you should, but otherwise never would know. Go see if you can do something together to help each other out. That brings the world forward. So forward.earth, we help climate and sustainability doers move the world forward.
Your model is based upon creating community, which I just came out of a meeting before our conversation in how our firm is really focused on and being present in the community, cultivating community. We host different events that are designed to build community and use authenticity as the basis of creating a safe environment for people to experience that community building. How do you do that in such a, what's the formula to create community in such a disparate world, and also something that in spaces that are very technical and everyone has these potentially competing agendas?
For us, it starts local and goes global. So it's our in-person events in 60 plus cities, Zurich, New York, Stockholm, Paris, Berlin, kind of name your big city, and bringing together those local ecosystems. But to do that, we have to have local city leads and volunteers. So who are the type of people that would really benefit from leading the local ecosystem? Well, maybe it's the sustainability startup trying to meet clients or investors. Maybe it's the student trying to get a job or kind of fulfill career requirements. Maybe it's the investor looking for companies to invest in, the corporate trying to showcase what they're doing, consultant trying to land clients. So it's very much a how to win friends and influence people. Think about the incentives that they have and how you can help get them there faster and thereby also accomplish what you're doing on a larger and bigger scale, and then plugging that into the global, because knowing the best people in Wyoming, or knowing the best people in Seattle, or knowing the top energy folks in Australia, it only gets you so far. And that's where the larger global ecosystem comes in, where it's less relevant about location and more relevant about interests, possible partnerships, collaborations, etc. I wouldn't say that we have it down by any means, but for us, the way we kind of explain it is it's LinkedIn plus Meetup plus Tinder for climate and sustainability. So those startups, corporates, governments, investors, the folks who should meet but otherwise never would because they're in their innovation chambers or over at universities, or they're dealing with stakeholders, or their governments shaking hands and doing nothing. Whatever it happens to be, they can connect, collaborate, and do the other things they otherwise never could with in-person events, which have random networking and connections, as well as online random networking connections, forums, etc. So you could accidentally bounce into, be it maybe a student looking for help on a research paper, or maybe if it's something more in your field, Warren Buffett trying to find a little bit more about climate and investing some of his funds over there.
Well, you point out a great dynamic between the local access that we all have to create community, but also the leverage of technology to have touch points with people around the world. You're in Zurich, Switzerland right now. I'm in Birmingham, Michigan, and there's an infinite world of possibilities when we combine that both local and technology-based global connectivity. A topic that I really appreciate your insight on is, as it relates to sustainability, is recycling. And we have two daughters, probably, dozen plus years ago, really became a highlight in our home to be more conscious about recycling and just not, randomly throwing everything into the trash. But I also learned from my daughters that there's great limitations on what can truly be converted into sustainable products. Maybe you could unpack for listeners some of the challenges and in that space, and maybe what's available for some of the work that you're working on too.
So it's 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. And recycle is kind of like taking your kids to the zoo. You do it and it's sort of good, but it's really not that effective, and it's more for the kids. So there certainly is effectiveness to recycling based off of where you're located, and some places are better than others. A lot of times products are hard to recycle, but even more important is the less you buy, the less the world needs to produce. So secondhand marketplaces, essentially all the clothes, especially all your kids' clothes, all your kids' toys, all your kids' shoes, all these things you're going through. You don't need new for almost anything. And new just means one extra thing gets thrown into landfill at some point that you spent 90% more money on than you should have, and that has therefore a much higher carbon emission and carbon footprint. So rather than thinking about recycling, the kind of circularity is the key to improving our world, in that we can do it and increase the quality of standard of life without having to have a larger GDP, and mean that we're spending less money in the process, because we don't have to produce as much as we do. We have such inefficient supply chains and ecosystems currently. For example, you live in Michigan. Do you have a lawnmower? Do all of your neighbors have lawnmowers?
And they are
Why in God's name? So let's say instead of everyone having their own $100 to $500 lawnmower to have to mow their lawn every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on how rainy it is, and other than that, it's never, ever, ever being used, you buy one for the neighborhood that's one of those vroom, vroom ones you're riding on, or you have autonomous ones, or whatever it happens to be. You can get the top of the line model. You all pay 1/10 of the price because you're chipping in. Takes you way less time to mow your lawn, and everyone wins. And there's a lot of sharing economy type things over there. So not Uber sharing, like ride sharing, which isn't ride sharing. It's just a taxi as a service type thing, but true kind of sharing, Airbnb, other types of things, or community use models. They're not sexy from an investment perspective because they don't necessarily drive additional consumption and GDP, but they are great from a sustainability as well as a savings perspective for customers. So reducing is one. Reusing, are there ways that you can kind of repurpose what you're doing? So rather than recycling, let's say shoes, hard to recycle, but a lot of times you'll see they have these different, especially at playgrounds and stuff, the material that your kids will be playing on the playground so they don't fall down and essentially kill themselves. It's very rubbery, and it might come from shoe soles, or it might come from the wheels on your car, or the wheels on the car being repurposed for the soles of shoes, etc. A lot of those repurposing things. Ditto with batteries. So, oh no, your battery. Why does your iPhone battery slow down every 2 years or so when they release a new one? Well, A, they're kind of pushing you bad updates to make it take more capacity, but B as well, charging and uncharging, it lowers the capacity of the battery over time. So you're not imagining it. But those batteries, even when they're not high enough performance for the Tesla or whatever you're driving, those batteries are still incredibly useful in other applications like energy storage. They just might not be as good for having a ton of capacity to get you from A to B. But if you have lots of these lower capacity batteries tied together in a storage facility, accomplishes a super important value proposition at a much lower cost because it's now being repurposed, and you don't have to recycle it. So it's much more efficient. It's finding how do we move the economy up that efficiency framework so that less is wasted, because we don't have to produce more to have more. We can also just waste less.
That's a great challenge to a mindset shift, and especially in Western society, affluent societies, more is the only thing that matters. And so we've become this culture that loves consumption and also loves personal identity around consumption, when there's so much available to create true wealth, which is based on things like connectivity and health and
Time.
Time.
You have more time if you don't need as much money to buy stuff.
And time is the ultimate currency. So that is great insight. Matt, I want to thank you for spending time in the canoe. I think your initiatives are meaningful, and I really appreciate the effort and energy that you've put into making the world a better place.
Thank you. And if folks want to get involved, odds are we have a group and events in your city, as well as our online platform. It's just 4ward, the number 4ward.earth. And if you don't think you're in climate and sustainability, you are, because food, transportation, energy, the built world, finance, manufacturing, all essentially things that we're doing, living, selling, being, All of those have carbon footprints. All of those have supply chains. Those can be made better, and you can find ways to improve what you're doing or connect with others who are doing similar things to make what you're doing better. So just forward.earth. Check out the platform, the events, everything. It's all free, and hopefully you can find a way to move your career and our world forward.
Thank you for that invitation, Matt. All the best.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.